Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. The case I'm going to be looking into today is a pretty strange one, if I do say so myself. It is on Pazuzu Algarad, who was a self-proclaimed Satanist that spent his days casually making animal sacrifices and just drinking blood, like human blood, animal blood, any blood, amongst doing many other things. Now, he did suffer greatly from mental health issues, so that is gonna obviously be this, a pretty big focus in this case. Not a lot is really known about his childhood, but let me tell you, he wasn't always called Pazuzu. That's not a birth-given family name, which you will find out as we go through this case. I'd just like to let you know, I mean no disrespect to anyone I talk about today. I've just gathered this information from the internet and compiled it into a video for educational purposes. Oh, I also forgot to mention that this case is a suggested case. That's mainly all I do. I get quite a lot of suggestions actually, so I try and obviously get through them as much as I can. And this one was suggested by Brittany, so thank you for that. I appreciate any suggestions you guys have, and I certainly found this one an interesting one. So, John Alexander Lawson was born on the 12th of August in 1978 to parents Cynthia and Timothy in San Francisco in California. His parents actually met and married in 1971, and then they relocated at some point to Clemens, North Carolina. In 1990, however, they ended up getting a divorce, and Timothy decided that he was going to move back to California, whereas John and his mother, Cynthia, stayed in North Carolina. They had made their home there and they wanted to stay, and that is what they did. In 1998, Cynthia remarried to a man called John Larry James, and then the three of them all lived together. The thing as to why we don't really know much about his childhood, I guess, is that John was very much a liar. He would tell them lots of lies about everything, and he would just, you wouldn't know whether something coming out of his mouth was even remotely truthful at all. And it's, I guess, like the boy who cried wolf. Tell that many lies, and then when something is truthful, you just don't believe them because they lie that often. He used to tell people that he was from Iraq. He used to tell people that his father was dead. He used to tell people that his father was a high priest. People that knew him as, in his younger days, said that he was a bit off kilter and that he was very emotional. Now, from a very young age, Cynthia said that he would harm animals, which definitely not a good sign. Anybody in the true crime community, we all know that. We all know that children harming animals never ends well. It often leads to, eventually in later life, them harming people. And they, quite often turn into murderers. I'm not saying all the time. Not everyone does, obviously. But the majority of them definitely do. It is just definitely not a good sign. Wanting to torture innocent little animals and cause them pain and kill them or hurt them and maim them is awful. And it's just disgusting. And again, it's not a good sign, let me tell you. There's also a lot of mental health issues tied to that too. A lot of people that do that do suffer with mental health issues, as you already know. That is a big part of this case. Pazuzu, no, he's not called that yet. John would also consume a lot of alcohol and drugs from a very young age. And that was about the same time that he was harming the animals. His mother, rightly so, was really worried about him, and she actually took him to see a psychiatrist because she felt like she needed to get him help, and she did. She did manage to get him some help. He was diagnosed with several mental illnesses, as well as schizophrenia and agoraphobia. And agoraphobia is something where people don't like to go outside of their house, and if they do not like to be in crowded areas with a lot of people. The really sad thing about this case is that, yes, Cynthia was there. She was trying to get her son help because she knew that he needed it, but she ran out of money. And so the psychiatric help that he was getting just stopped because she couldn't afford it anymore. And his mental health really deteriorated, and he just went downhill pretty quickly after that, which is just really sad because mental health issues, people can't help them. They need help. They need the support. They need help. And unfortunately, he did have it, but then it went away because, his mum couldn't afford it, which is not her fault, but it's just a tragic situation all around. It was in 2002 that he became Pazuzu Algarad. He was now a devoted Satanist, and he was also a drug dealer. Pazuzu is actually the name of the king of demons in Mesopotamian mythology. It was actually a homage as well to the Assyrian demon, which was featured heavily in the film The Exorcist. So that's maybe where he got the inspiration for it, actually. Pazuzu liked to make other people feel really uncomfortable, and he would often brag about sacrificing animals around them, which would definitely make you uncomfortable. That's for sure. It would make me very uncomfortable. He would also tell people like he was able to control the weather, which I don't get. Why? I don't know, but he did. And after he changed his name, he really wanted to pull away from society, really wanted to ostracize himself and just be very isolated and not out in the public eye. Again, he had agoraphobia anyway, so that was probably a huge part of it. And he began modifying his body. Maybe that was, you know, because he wanted to make people feel uncomfortable, because that's what he enjoyed. And not that modifying your body should make people uncomfortable, but maybe in his eyes it did. You know, I don't know his reasoning behind it. Or maybe he just wanted to. You know, some people like modifying the body, and whatever you want to do is whatever you want to do. That is completely up to you. I'm not putting any like badness around that. So what he did was he began tattooing his face. He also filed his teeth to points to make them, you know, like vampire teeth, like where they suck the blood. He filed his teeth to points, all of them like that. He also split his tongue like a snake would. I guess Satan is very thought to be with snakes and things like that. So whether that was the inspiration, I don't know. But he split his tongue like a snake would, like a snake's tongue. Not a snake splits its own tongue, because it doesn't. Like a snake's tongue. One thing I forgot to mention as well, he pointed his teeth with a Dremel. So he used like a power tool to do it, which, I don't know, would that have been painful? I would imagine that would have been painful. Surely. I don't know. He really drew inspiration from Charles Manson. It was like his idol, which was not a good idol to have, for sure. But as you'll see throughout this case, he really, really did kind of mold himself like Charles Manson. He just really loved how Charles was able to manipulate people into doing bad things for him, so that he never had to get his hands dirty. It was always them. But he was telling them to do it. He basically brainwashed his followers, you know, to do horrible things for him. And then he didn't have to do it himself. He, you know, loved how he was followed and how he was idolized. It really sparked something in Pazuzu though, because he decided that he was going to make his own religion. He mixed Luciferianism, I think that's how you say it, and Islam. And he created a whole new religion out of it. He wanted to create something new that no one had done before. He did it as a scare tactic because people are scared of Lucifer. You know, some people are anyway. And there's a lot of fear around Luciferianism. Yeah. So he chose that one, and then he decided to choose Islam because this was the year after, tragically, 9/11 happened. And so there was still a lot of fear around the Islam religion, around terrorism. As sad as it is, obviously, you can't ever tie anyone with the same brush kind of thing. But there was still a lot of fear of that around that time. And he just wanted to sort of capitalise on that. And that is why he decided to choose both of those. He was really struggling with his mental health, and he began to stop looking after himself. So he never showered or brushed his teeth. I think he's showered like once a year. Psychiatrists said that he bathed no more than once a year, and he hadn't brushed his teeth in years. He said that he claimed that personal hygiene stripped the body of its defences in warding off infection and illness. To me, it's more likely to cause infection and illness, but there you go. Obviously, he was struggling with his mental health, and that is how he was thinking, unfortunately. So following in his idol's path, you know, please don't have Charles Manson as your idol, because it is not a good idol, but it was his idol. So following in his path, he needed to get, you know, people behind him. He needed to get people to follow him. And so he just started surrounding himself with people of a lower class and kind of like very vulnerable people. So people who had drug addictions, people who were homeless, people who were jobless. And in the sense, the same as him, outcasts of society, or at least they thought they were. And he would go on to call them misfits. And these misfits were just people that were struggling themselves. And I guess when he came along with whatever he was saying, you know, they felt like they should follow him. And they did. his house at 2749 Nob Hill Drive. Well, I say his house, it's not actually his house, it was his mother's house and his stepdad's, but they'd since moved out and were living elsewhere, leaving him, Pazuzu, to live in the house alone, which wasn't a very good idea. But obviously, you can't just mollycoddle your kids all the time because, well, it became his hub for obviously all his religion. He would let them come round and they could stay as long as they wanted. They could do whatever they wanted. So in their eyes, it was a safe place to maybe do their drugs or something like that, where they could gather, they could, you know, all do drugs together. Whatever they wanted to do, they could do. He had no rules, he had no anything. And so I guess that's how he got them to follow him, really, because they would just keep coming back because of that, or even, you know, stay there. He didn't care what they did to his home, like, at all. There were no rules. One friend said that you can pee on his carpet, smash his TV. They said that people used to hate each other with beer bottles, and he just didn't care. He also gained a few lady followers, which he would call his fiancées. He would stage orgies and sleep with pretty much every one of them. Basically sleeping with anyone that he could, really. And everyone worshipped him. Amber Birch and Crystal Matlock were his two main fiancées. And they stayed at his house a lot, and they really, really inflated his ego, you know. He loved it. He was getting everything he wanted. He wanted to be just like Charles, and he was getting there. The things that occurred at his house were things like self-harm. So people would harm themselves, like, all the time. They would drink the blood of birds, which is gross. They would perform animal sacrifices, such as rabbits and things like that, and all the time doing copious amounts of drugs. Obviously, as a result of that kind of attitude, he didn't care what happened to his house, and so it was just a wreck. Like, there was trash everywhere, garbage everywhere. It was disgusting. Like, the living conditions that people were staying in was just really gross. There was piles of feces in the corner of the room, and people used to urinate in the corners of the rooms. Why they didn't just go to the toilet, I don't know, but they didn't. They just used to do it in the corner of the room. It must have stunk in there as well. Like, they had animal carcasses in there just lying around. They had feces and urine. I can't even imagine how bad it must have smelled. They also had blood smeared all over the wall, so if they would have done an animal sacrifice, smear that on the walls. If they would have self-harmed, smear that on the walls. It was just everywhere. It was always really dark. It stunk of decay. There were these satanic messages all over the wall, pentagrams everywhere, and that was just all over the property. So it was, this house was just a complete wreck. If any new people would come around, they would say, like, oh my god, what is that disgusting smell? And he would just say, oh, it's the dead bodies that are in the basement. And I guess people took that lightly. Didn't really think much of it. It turned out to be the truth, unfortunately. So although Cynthia has moved out, she goes back home to check on her son every now and again. And she does so in May of 2010. She goes down, she sees Pazuzu, and they get into an argument, and it results in him strangling her to the point where she's unconscious. So when she comes around, she calls the police immediately, and she tells them that obviously her son's just strangled her, and they go and arrest him. Cynthia actually decides against pressing charges against her son, and you know, you can't really blame her for that. It's her son, and he had mental health issues, a lot of them, and she felt bad, so she didn't want to press charges. In September of 2010, the body of Joseph Emmerich Chandler was discovered in Yadkin County. Pazuzu was accused of concealing information from the police and allowing a murder suspect to stay at his house. In 2011, he was arrested in connection with the shooting of Joseph Chandler.
Take your name for the record.
Pazuzu Algarad.
Please. What does that mean? Is that for me?
It's just her.
What does it mean? Say it to me. You hear me?
Yes.
Could you answer the question, please?
It's a Lord's name.
Joseph was found dead near Radkim River, and he was just there minding his own business. He was apparently about to light a cigarette, and he was shot before he could even light it. Now, Radkim River is where Pazuzu would often go and partake in black magic rituals and sacrifices. So he was there, you know, quite often, and he would claim that they would kill people on full moons. And guess what? This was a full moon. There were actually 3 of them there. There was Pazuzu, his friend Nicholas, and one of his followers. Now, apparently Nicholas was the one that pulled the trigger, and Pazuzu was obviously just there. Whether that's true, don't know. Nicholas was actually convicted of involuntary manslaughter, and Pazuzu was charged with accessory after the fact of involuntary manslaughter. He's convicted in 2011 and sentenced to probation, so he just kind of got a slap on the wrist. And that was that. Nicholas was, however, put in jail for it. Whilst he was in custody, he got a psych evaluation, and that would actually end up being leaked to the public and the media. Don't know how, but it did. But regardless, in this report, it detailed a long list of mental health issues that he was suffering from. There was so many of them. It just really gave the public the message that he needed help and that he should have been, I don't know, a mental health facility, in jail, something. He was not really that safe to be released back into the public. It detailed, you know, everything he was doing. He's drinking blood, and it scared people, you know, because he just got a slap on the wrist and he was back out there. I believe though that around the time the US don't really have much psychiatric units and hospitals, so I'm not sure about that one. If anyone knows, please let me know. But from what I could find, it was either letting them go again or jail. And a lot of people with mental health issues end up in jail where they should be in a hospital. But unfortunately, the US don't have that, and so they end up in prison more often than not. So you're kind of getting your head around the person that Pazuzu is. He's really struggling with his mental health. He has a lot of mental health issues. And then a man goes missing named Joshua Frederick Welzer, and he just suddenly vanishes off the face of the earth. He was actually last seen by his girlfriend Stacy in the July of 2009. Now, she didn't actually report him as missing until 6 months after his final contact with family or friends, which you may think is very, very strange. I did think that was strange myself. You know, how can you not report someone missing for 6 months? But she said that he would often go off on trips and go off and take a break. He would disappear for months at a time, no contact with anyone, and it was just kind of normal for him. So that's why she didn't think anything was wrong. But she actually reported him as a missing person when he didn't contact anyone for Christmas, because she said that he would have never ever missed contacting people on a holiday, and that is when she knew something was wrong. She'd also heard rumours that Pazuzu had killed Josh and buried him in his back garden, so she went to the police with that too. I don't know what came from that, because she's literally heard that her boyfriend has been murdered and he's in his back garden. Went to the police and they seemingly did nothing about it. I don't know. The same year, in October, Tommy Dean Walsh went missing too. Tommy had spent the day at his brother's, and then at some point he left, but his family was arranging kind of a movie night, so he was, even though he did leave, he was supposed to come back to obviously enjoy his family movie night, and he never did. Now, they thought something was really, really wrong, because it wasn't like Tommy to do something like that. He would have been there, and if not, he would have called as to why not. So they called the police, and unfortunately couldn't really find anything. The two men went missing pretty close together, and can you guess who was behind it? One night, Pazuzu decided to abduct Josh, seemingly randomly. Like, I don't even think that he knew him or anything like that, or he had a real, even if he knew him, that he had even a reason to abduct him. The only thing that it seems it was that he felt like he needed a sacrifice, and then he picks Josh. Josh was chained and starved in his basement for days. Nobody really paid any attention to him. Nobody really did anything, and then, you know, Pazuzu goes down and shoots him 6 times with a shotgun, killing him. Him and his fiancée then dismembered his body, and they buried him in his backyard. So when the claims of him being in the backyard were going to the police, they were actually true. Then again, the same thing happened with Tommy. He was chained, he was not fed, and then he was also killed with a shotgun, and then buried in the back garden after being dismembered yet again. It was coming to a point where Pazuzu was kind of getting, you know, really out of control. He was spiraling, and he had murdered these poor 2 innocent people and seemingly wanted to murder more. And so his followers began to worry. He was becoming more and more aggressive towards them, towards everyone. And one of them decided that they were going to speak up, and before he got too out of control, so they went to the police. So they tell them all this, and then they go to search the house, and guess what? They find nothing. They say that it smells disgusting and that it was gross kind of thing, but they don't find anything, and so they just leave. Like, they didn't check the back garden or anything, and I don't know why they did that, but they didn't. Police would then continue to get all these tips about him. Even his own mother would call and say that she's heard these rumours that her son has killed someone and buried them in the back garden, and the police just didn't do anything. They just ignored them all, which is just ridiculous. On the 5th of October in 2014, we're now 5 years later, so all these tips and things coming in, all the information that the police had, 5 years have now passed before they decide that they're going to get a second warrant to search his house again. And this time they finally search the backyard, and guess what? They find the remains of Josh and Tommy, which are now skeletal at this point. 35-year-old Pazuzu and his 24-year-old girlfriend, Amber Birch, were both arrested. Shortly after their arrest, his other fiancée, 28-year-old Crystal Matlock, was charged in connection with the death of one of the bodies that were found. She was suspected of being the one helping to bury Josh. Soon after the remains were found, Counting House officials declared the home as being unfit for human habitation. And in April of 2015, Pazuzu's House of Horrors was demolished, and the neighbours couldn't be happier about that because they hate that place. In the early hours of the 28th of October 2015, Pazuzu was found dead in his cell in the Central Prison in North Carolina before his trial had even begun. The death was ruled a suicide. He had cut his arm with what we don't know because it still remains unknown to this day. But it left families of the victims with more questions than answers. They didn't know why their family members were targeted. They didn't know his motives. They didn't know anything, and now he wasn't here to answer it. On the 9th of March in 2017, Amber Birch pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, armed robbery and accessory after the fact to murder. She was sentenced to a minimum of 30 years and 8 months in prison, with a maximum of 39 years and 2 months. On the 5th of June 2017, Crystal Matlock pleaded guilty to conspiracy to accessory after the fact of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to a minimum of 3 years and 2 months, with a maximum of 4 years and 10 months in prison. Although the years have passed, and obviously Pazuzu is no longer here, the Satan worshipper continues to live on in infamy for his bizarre and horrific crimes in North Carolina, and it's thought that actually he may have potentially killed more people than we know about. This case was very strange, and again, really focused on mental health, and it really breaks my heart because maybe if he had gotten more help, which again, Cynthia couldn't afford, it is not her fault by any means. But that's a real tragedy of this, because maybe if he had, then maybe none of this would have happened. I mean, it could have still happened. You know, some people go off the meds and, you know, do things anyway. But I don't know, just if he had a bit more help, maybe it wouldn't have. And obviously the families of those involved that never really found out properly what happened. He never got to serve the time for what he'd done. And they were just left kind of with questions, and obviously the loss of their loved one too. What are your thoughts on this case? Let me know in the comments below. Give me a big thumbs up if you've enjoyed this video, and subscribe to my channel for similar content. Anyway guys, that's all I have today on the case of Pazuzu Algarad. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.